What's up, my friends? Jason Woodland back again with Always the Journey TV. This time we're on episode number 57. So we're out here rocking and rolling, talking to all kinds of amazing people. Again, the objective of this show is to spotlight people in the community to learn more about their businesses, their jobs, their music, their art, their side hustles, event spaces, and everything in between. Today, I'm ultra excited to introduce to you a very dear friend. His name is Tron Black. Tron is a freedom advocate, crypto developer, and entrepreneur. Tron holds a BS in computer science and a master's degree in business administration. Very, very well-versed individual for sure. Since early 2013, Tron has been working in the cryptocurrency space as a miner, developer, investor, and a trader. He was one of the first 5 employees at tZero, and also helped issue the first publicly traded SEC-acknowledged parallel crypto equity for Overstock.com, and issued the world's first crypto bond offering. He worked for ANX International, a crypto-fintech company located in Hong Kong. Tron was a principal developer for Medici Ventures, which invested in a portfolio of blockchain companies. Tron has also given away cryptocurrencies to hundreds of people in order to increase awareness of how value now moves as easily as email. He's written articles about Bitcoin, Monero, Dash, financial regulations, security tokens, also known as STOs, and Ravencoin, and has been featured on many cryptocurrency podcasts around the world. He's the inventor of a number of patents in the crypto space and regularly gives talks on cryptocurrency topics worldwide. Tron is currently the president of Ravencoin Foundation and advisor to tZero, Tusk, shout out to our friends over at Tusk, WedX, and supporter of RVN, which is both a top cryptocurrency and leading crypto asset platform. On top of that, Tron Black has one of the coolest names in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce my friend Tron Black. What's happening?
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a real pleasure having you on. How's your morning going so far?
Morning's been great.
Absolutely.
It's a little cold today, but it's been a great morning.
It is a little bit cold, but thankfully it looks like we've got some nice sunshine, and hopefully we get some more snow again soon, though, huh?
Yep. White Christmas.
Exactly. Yeah, so Christmas week. So thank you very much for dedicating some time to the Always the Journey TV show. I'm so happy to have you on here.
Oh, thanks.
Absolutely. So I've got a handful of questions, obviously. But first of all, I'd like to sort of learn a little bit pre the famous Tron Black as we know today. What was your childhood like?
Let's see. I grew up, I lived in Pennsylvania. I was born in Colorado, lived in Pennsylvania till I was 5. My dad was a chemical engineer, worked for Procter & Gamble near Mahoopany, Pennsylvania, which is where they made Charmin. He actually worked for making Charmin. They actually kind of fired that plant back up, just because of this toilet paper shortage that we had a couple of years ago. But when I was 5, we moved to Utah, and I brought my parents with me. And then we had, it was a great childhood. We lived kind of at the north end of Salt Lake Valley in the Avenues, and I don't know, had friends. I wasn't like, the super jock or popular kid or anything, but I had great childhood. We got to, this is back in the 70s. So, my parents had a truck and we got to ride in the back of it. And, our rule was we had to sit down low, but it was a good time, right? I mean, that was, we now have all these rules about seatbelts and all that kind of stuff. But in my mind, I like this time of, I like that time of like, hey, it's just felt a little more freedom-ish at the time, right? We used to have a lot more rules, parents throwing kids in the back of the truck. You can still do it in Mexico, but you can't do it. Can't do that here in Utah anymore. I grew up, bike and skateboarding and I wasn't great. Next door, they had a half pipe, but those were the cool kids. I was just kind of basic, skateboard down the hill. And then when I was, I'm going to say like 13, I think, I got a computer. An Atari. I think it was 12. My parents took me to Radio Shack, and there was a Tandy Radio Shack, and they give me this little brochure, and I opened it up, and it said, type your name into the computer. And so I type it in, hit enter, and it'll say bad commander file name. And so I did that and hit enter, and it didn't say that. So the very first thing I ever did on a computer didn't match the brochure. Turns out my name stands for Tracer on the language for the Tandy Radio Shack. So my name's actually a command, so it didn't work out like the brochure. So anyway, I got a computer, got an Atari. This is back like early Apple II, VIC-20, Commodore 64, and the Atari, and the Amiga. These were the computers that were coming out back then. It was kind of pre-IBM PC kind of stuff. And so I just spent tons of time on that, playing with it, doing some games. We had some cartridges for games, but you could also get Softside magazine, and you could type in stuff and kind of type in. So you're like programming a game that somebody else had programmed. You're basically just putting the code in instead of loading it from a disk. And so I would spend my nights typing stuff in. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, and then. And then I started programming for the Atari for my dad. He was in wastewater treatment basically, and so they had big equipment. And so I programmed visual stuff that showed how the valves open, water flowed in. I created stuff to create bubbles going up, and basically it was kind of a glorified slideshow that took months or something to create. But they used that at the trade show and had it, show how everything works and stuff like that. And they said for that, they would either give me a scholarship or I could buy this little $200 computer. Of course, I took the $200 computer's little Tandy Radio Shack portable computer thing with the basic language. So I got that instead of a scholarship. Probably not the wisest decision, but I was like 12, 13 years old. But that's kind of how I got started. So yeah.
And approximately what year was that?
Oh, gosh. So I was born in 67, so it probably would have been like 80, 81, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were 12, 13, getting into the computer realm then at that point.
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of friends that were also getting involved in computers at the time, or?
Only classmates. So, yeah, these were... Actually, it might have been 14, because I was 12. Yeah, it might have been 14. Because I think it was junior high initially, and then in high school took they had a computer class. PCs weren't a thing, so that, we were programming, I think, a PDP-11. This was a shared computer, time-shared computer, and we were like rebel troublemakers. We would figure out what it was shared with multiple schools, and so you could figure out the command to basically send stuff to the other school's printer. You couldn't send people's terminals, but you could send stuff to other printers. So we basically went down the thing, trying different, incrementing the number until it accepted the print job. And then we just sent form feeds to the other school's printer. So somewhere in some school, probably South High, it was just shooting paper out. So I'm hoping the statute of limitations has passed for that troublemaking stunt. But yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So if you don't mind me asking, which junior high and high school did you go to?
I went to Bryant Junior High, and I went to East High School.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So in essence, you were playing the sneakers game before sneakers came out.
Yeah.
That movie is hands down one of the best.
It is a great movie.
Oh, that is awesome. That's actually one of the movies that got me interested also in learning about cryptography and the world of coding. Although I never took the path of coding myself, I read a lot of books about it and just really got into it. It was very interesting. So fast forwarding a little bit, you started obviously developing and getting involved in computers at a very young age. And then you decided to go to college for computer science.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Sure. It was an easy decision. I went to the University of Utah. It was, quick distance from where I lived, basically with my parents. And so it was an easy decision. I had a great computer science program. I'd already done AP physics at the U, right? So the East High basically just fobbed that out to the University of Utah. So I'd kind of already driven up there to do physics. And it was close and had a good program. and it was a little tricky to get in. But I had so grades. Grades have never been my I'm not after grades, just wasn't my thing. But I got in, and it was a great program. I really liked it. Great instructors. I was a little frustrated at one point. I look back and I think, I was probably wrong. The professors were probably right. But one of the things that they wouldn't do is they wouldn't teach. I was programming stuff for Windows at the time, and Windows was becoming really big, sort of the Windows 3.1 kind of thing, and the Windows API, and most of the actual, as computers were kind of flowing into people's houses and not, being in data centers and being, that kind of thing. It was like being introduced into into the world where, you have personal computers. It was mostly Windows, and that was what was making it popular. And so I was programming for that already, kind of as a hobby and stuff, trying to, start a business and things like that. And they wouldn't teach that at the university. It's like, no, we're teaching, SQL, and we're teaching Unix, and we're teaching that kind of thing. And I thought, in my mind, it's like, hey, the big thing, where money's going to be, where everybody's going to have these, it would, and they wouldn't do it. So it was a little frustrating at the time. Looking back, I think, well, they were teaching almost the fundamentals and the basics, right? Whereas the other stuff is it's sort of come and go, right? So some of that's, the SQL and all that's still around. The Windows API has just changed lots of times, and so they in that regard, looking back with the wisdom of old age, thought they may have been right on that. So.
Okay, interesting. So in essence, they really sort of stuck to the building blocks of it, and not this sort of sexy side of the developing.
Yeah. And so I think today's analogy, would probably be, the boot camps and things like that are teaching, specifically how to do write a program for the iPhone or something like that. Versus the university might not be teaching, doing iPhone programming. And so, whereas iPhone programming, it's lucrative and it's the popular thing, and you can write a program, put it on the, make money, but the universities are probably still teaching, kind of more of the basics. Operating systems and languages and, data structures and stuff like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And isn't it also true that the University of Utah was one of the pioneers in the internet itself?
It was. If you look and see where it's connected, right? It was connecting kind of from California through Utah. It was one of the big early ones. And in fact, I had gone to the University of Utah to, as part of, I worked for a company that, for a school basically, and they had a school field trip kind of thing. And so I went to that and, got to go through the robotics lab and all these different things. And they were showing off some of the stuff that, was early internet stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. And
this was Mosaic, right? Sort of, before Netscape. And so you saw some of that. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just looking at Utah in general. Of course, we've got Silicon Slopes. Yeah. We're internationally known now as being a really strong tech hub.
Yep.
But I think there's a lot of people that don't realize that the tech side of Utah is really deep rooted.
Yeah.
I mean, for Utah and University of Utah to be really connected to the very, very early grounds of the internet itself, is as big as it gets.
Yeah.
I think it was University of Utah was communicating with UCLA, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think maybe Berkeley.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a special place. It brings about a lot of really advanced thinking within technology. There's a lot of the DIY or the do-it-yourself mentality in learning and that kind of stuff. So we
were also very, very involved in early film and computer digital rendering. So I did do, they make you do this stuff in the university, right? You have to be a well-rounded person, so that you have to do all these things. But one of them was a film class, and so in the film class, I learned Tron, the movie, right? It was all done, all the lighting and all the pinstriping and all the digital effects and stuff for the movie Tron was done at the University of Utah, which is kind of fun because
really,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
an awesome piece of information. I love that movie.
Yeah.
And of course, a movie named after you.
I know. Well, that's what kind of resonated. Named after me. Yeah. I'm still waiting for the royalty checks. I assume they're just lost in the mail. And, yeah, there was also a famous teapot that they render for all the videos and things like that, for digital rendering, because it shows reflections and all that. And that was done at the University of Utah as well. And so, when I went to a lot of that, I didn't realize until I went to there's a computer museum in California.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through there, and and it was funny because since I was early on, I was like, oh, I have one of those and one of those, and different computers that were kind of these early computers or whatever. And my mom went to the Smithsonian. She's like, I have one of those in my basement. I have one of those in my basement. So yeah, we have all these old computers.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. When I first got introduced to computers, my stepdad was very involved in computers, and I remember the floppy disks that were about 5 inches by 5 inches or whatever.
Yep.
And there was a game called Mule, from what I remember, and it was just some weird traveling kind of game. And then of course the game Doom that was out in the 90s. That was interesting in and of itself. So of course you've not only got a sort of a personally taught background in computer science and just doing the DIY concept, but of course now you're sort of classically trained, so to speak, also in the college setting. When you left college, of course, you got your bachelor's in computer science and then your master's degree in business administration. What was the sort of inspiration to move from the computer science to the master's degree in biz admin?
Yeah, it actually wasn't. I didn't feel like I was moving. I felt like at the time, I felt like computers would let me do anything faster and better than anybody else who didn't have computers or didn't have this background. And I still feel that way, right? I mean, almost everybody has computers, so but anybody who doesn't, right? They're at a massive disadvantage, right? And so at the time, especially with the internet stuff coming along, or modems, and being able to transfer stuff, being able to look stuff up, I just felt like I had this big advantage. And so I considered doing law school. And so I thought, you know what, I could probably just read a bunch of books and then just take the test. And so I actually called and I mean, I'm just a kid. So I'm like, hey, can I just read all the law books and then just take the test? And they're like, no, you actually have to go through the school kind of thing. I'm like, okay. And then I found, so it was University of Phoenix allowed an online program.
Cool.
For business and for to get an MBA. And I thought, well, that's going to be really easy for me because I can just, read the books, do the homework. All I have to do is do the homework and send it. And I don't have to necessarily go in and that kind of thing. And I thought that sounds awesome. And so I went in to meet with them and they said, yeah, you can do that. But we also have a program you can come in and then if you want to read the books, there's most of the things you can test out of. Like if you have the skill set, you can just study the book and come take the test, and you don't have to take the class, and we're not going to slow you down, right? We'll just let you go faster.
Awesome.
Thought, well, that sounds awesome. So I did that. So there were not all the classes you could do that. You could take the test, but for the ones I could, I just read the book, took the test, and skipped a class and stuff. And then some of the other, and it was honestly one of the most fun times. It was more fun than the computer science stuff. It was computer science I really liked because their philosophy was you're not memorizing stuff. All the tests were open book. You had to know what you were doing, right? And you had to know enough to be able to take this test, but you had the book, right? So it wasn't like book learning. It was like understanding, like core understanding. The stuff related to the MBA thing was more like you couldn't use the book. So it was more like learn this, memorize it, and then take the test. So a little bit different type of thinking, but it was super fun because particularly at the University of Phoenix, the instructors are not like academics, like been academics their whole life. They had to be out working. And so the people that were teaching these courses, like the law and things like that, were the assistant attorney general for Utah. And the person teaching stuff for the HR was working at like Morton Thiokol, and it was all these people that were working in these big places or whatever that were kind of doing this at night. And some of it was just really interesting. I mean, there were all kinds of like, games that they were doing about, where it's like you do something where like, how many do you going to manufacture? And then they, roll a dice and, create, maybe a storm happens. And so supply chains get cut off and you have to like, and so depending on these decisions that you made kind of like created this path and you had to act like the CEO. And so we were playing these games that just like really resonated with me. It was just like really fun to learn that way and kind of realize that like you can't just build as many as you want and they'll all buy them, right? I mean, there was things that were happening in the world that may caused you to have to adjust and change your position and things like that. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
That is awesome. I actually have experienced some of my college was at University of Phoenix, and hands down, some of the best experience I've ever had. And with all due respect to U of U and Salt Lake Community College, they're wonderful schools as well. But what I also found too is that you were learning from someone who is doing that right now.
Yep.
Not maybe had done that 20 years ago, or maybe have never done it.
Never done it. Right. That's the thing. I mean, when you get professors that it's like, they had maybe never been out in the world, like being an entrepreneur, right? But they're teaching you just this more from an academic standpoint kind of thing. Whereas, yeah, you're right. The University of Phoenix, they were in the field doing it.
Exactly. I remember in my business law class, the instructor was lead counsel for a big insurance company. And when you'd have a question, the instructor would be like, oh, yeah, this actually happened similarly about 3 weeks ago in the office. And here's what happened in real life. Yeah. And so we went through almost a real life case study of what he personally dealt with. Yeah. And then he said, now turn to chapter XYZ and we'll go through some of the theory and some of these background things. And then we could sort of juxtaposition it and see like what happened in the real world today, as opposed to what happened in this, concept that maybe took place in a case study like 9 years ago or 15 years ago or something. Yeah. So I'm with you.
The other thing that was interesting, it made it really interesting, was the students. Same thing. They had to have jobs. You couldn't go through this unless you were working. And so the skill set, I mean, there were doctors, there were engineers, there were marketing people, and it was really fascinating because because I was sort of an entrepreneur, so I had never worked in a big company, but you could tell from like the engineers were like, at least in this one guy's company, right? He was like against marketers. I mean, they were the ones that were like selling stuff that hadn't been built yet. And then he had to engineer it and he was mad at them and stuff like that. By the end of this thing, they had put him in marketing. At the end of it, over the 2 years or whatever, they put this guy in marketing. He just had a different mindset at that point. And it was interesting.
Well, and also, I mean, just to not harp much further, but you're hitting on some phenomenal points. When you'd have some of those team dynamics, when someone, like you said, was an engineer that had never done marketing, being able to work with a marketer in a marketing class, all of a sudden it opens up the mind saying, oh, okay, I understand now the marketing function on a more granular level. As opposed to thinking that the engineering department is enemies with the marketing department and the marketing department is enemy with sales and sales. It sort of melds it together because you have to work together from totally different backgrounds.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. This has been awesome so far. I'm loving this. Okay. So you graduated from college. What was some of your first things you got involved with in the professional space right out of college?
So I was already working at this point. So I was working at, I guess it's U.S. Steel. It was, what was it? I can't remember now. Anyway, a steel manufacturing thing in Provo, Orem. And I was in the, computer side of it, right? So some of it was, carrying computers to people's desks and, opening them up and adding PCs to, people's desks and putting memory in them and things like that. And then they wanted me to, they were a mainframe shop. So they had big, the big rooms with the cooling and the fire suppression systems and the raised floor and all that kind of stuff. They were mainframe shop. And so a lot of it was that I did was like bridging taking the ability to move data off their mainframe and be able to run it through a PC and be able to print like safety reports and data and things like that. So it's sort of bridging the two worlds, and I think it was to call it the middle of the transition, meaning these years, middle of a transition from having putting computing power in front of everybody, right, in front of instead of you take what you need and go to the guy who's running the mainframe and tell him what you want, and then wait a week and get your information back. This was transitioning to that, and there were frustrations. I got frustrated that there was a guy who came in that would sell memory sticks, right? They were like 1 megabyte memory sticks, and they were like $1,000 for a megabyte memory, and he would just sell a whole bunch, right? And I'd go have to put them in the computers. That was fine. I didn't mind putting them in. What was frustrating is I knew that I could get, from like online, I could get that same memory stick for like $300. And I thought, with the amount that they're buying, right, I can make 10 times what I'm making driving from Salt Lake to Provo and doing all this stuff. And with selling 2 memory sticks a week, I could have probably made more than I was making. And so I was like, I don't know. It was just, I just remember that in my head. It's like, man, there's a lot of money going out the door in memory sticks. And anyway. So I helped them. I got to drive out in the steel mill kind of thing, which is very, very dangerous. There's like, huge things of steel like driving by, and you have to be really careful, but it was fun. So I worked there, and did some programming there. Like I said, sort of bridging the mainframe stuff. And then I went to work for Waterford Institute. It's actually a school.
Yeah.
Here, it's actually kind of right by my house.
Yeah, 90th South area.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. So I helped wire that building for networking when they first built it. Nice. They had a Waterford school I think it was in Provo or Orem, but they were building one up here, so I helped wire that. And then they moved us all up there, and their goal was to create software that taught kids, specifically younger kids, sort of K through 6, taught kids better than teachers could teach them. Like the best software in the world at the time for teaching kids that could replace kind of the worst schools and worst teachers in the U.S. And so we built this software that would do math stuff. It would teach them mental math, so they're not counting on their fingers. And we had games. We had games where you answer questions with really quickly to launch a rocket, we had it was networked, so you could have a whole classroom or 2 labs full of kids, and they each became an avatar on a tug of war game, right? And they answer their math question. That's a tug, and so you have 2 teams basically pulling back and forth. So they're competing as a team, basically pulling these avatars, back and forth on this tug of war. It was a really cool game. And then there's another one where you answer questions to basically turn the snake. So it's the snake game where you try to avoid your tail or whatever. But you had to answer math questions on the arrows to turn it. And the math questions changed each time it turned. And so we had all these different games, but they were basically to get you to do mental math really quick. Really cool stuff. So I was supposed to install it in the worst school in the U.S. at the time was PS1 in the Bronx.
Oh, wow.
And so I went there and they sent me there and said, oh, yeah. So when you get in the cab, they put me up in Manhattan. Yeah. But they said, when you go in the cab, they said, get in the cab, tell them where you're going, because the cab's not, if you tell them where you're going before you get in, they'll just drive off. But if you're in there, they can't. And so you had to get in and say, I want to go to the Bronx. And then they're, oh, no, because they're not getting a fare back, and they don't want to. So I did that, went out to the Bronx and got my laptop and went into school. And it was eye-opening for me. I mean, I had to go through a metal detector for like a K through 6 school. The concrete walls were flaking apart. The office was like circa 1950s desks and old kind of like military looking desks and stuff like that. And anyway, I had to install this lab and I wire it up, right? So just networking and stuff. But it was 2 labs and 1 server, so I had to network between them. And I couldn't get the the wire, I had to drill a hole from one lab to the other. So I went to the office to see if they could lend me a drill or something, or tell me where to buy one. And they said, well, let me have you talk to the janitor thing. So I went to the janitor thing, and we went downstairs, and I wouldn't say it was like super nice, but I mean, he had a Barca lounger and a color TV and a soda machine, all this stuff. It was like he was doing better than the principal staff, right? So I said, hey, could I just borrow a drill? I just need to drill a hole, a really small hole, and he's like, for what? I said, well, just to run the the networking wire. It's like, oh, wire? That's union. You need the electrical union for that. I'm like, okay. So you're probably part of the janitors union. And
okay.
So anyway, yeah, after arguing with him for a while, I said, all right, this isn't working. I just opened the two windows on the two things, threw the cord across, threw it across, brought it on the other side, connected up, and said, all right, when it gets cold, you're going to want to shut these windows. Here's a connector. What you're going to do is just pull this out, drill a hole there, slide it through, connect it together. You'll be good. Because I had like 2 days to do all that. I had no time to fight with, find an electrical union.
No.
And then, so anyway, I get done about 10:30, and I'm ready to go, and there's nobody around. And so I said, well, I'll just go to the office. The office is open, which is great, right? And I'm like, I need a phone. There was no cell phones at this point.
What year was this again?
What's that?
What year was this?
Oh, let's see. I'm going to guess it was around 90 or 91.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range. So I walk into the office. Office is open. It's great. There's a telephone on the counter. That's great. It's got a lock on it. It's a dial telephone, right?
Yeah.
And it's got a physical lock on the phone, right, to keep it from dialing. So I used this trick that I'd heard about, right, because when you dial, it's like each one is like a tap on the thing.
Yep.
I picked it up, tapped. Well, it took me a while to figure this out, because I'm like scrambling. I'm stuck here in the Bronx, right, at 10:30 at night. I'm probably gonna die. And so I hit it 10 times or whatever, and got an operator, and decided to collect my parents, so that they would accept, because I wasn't sure who else would accept. And so they accepted, and I said, here's a list of numbers to call for a car service. And if you could just call them, and here's the number I'm at. If it doesn't work, call me back. And anyway, so then I'm waiting 10:30 at night, and I'm peeking out the door, and I see this kind of low rider with beads and stuff on the seats, and bobblehead in the dashboard. And I'm like, okay, that may be my car. If it's not, I'm probably gonna die. So I have a laptop right with me, and so I prop it in the school door, and I go down, and it was my car, and I survived the whole thing. But it was like, yeah, it was memorable experience, right, for a kid.
Yeah, that is memorable without a doubt.
Yeah,
what a cool experience though overall. I mean, to be able to help a school as disadvantaged as that, to be able to implement learning modules with math and all that. I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, no, it was great. The software was great. I mean, it would calibrate for how they were doing and stuff. So
yeah. So fast forwarding a bit now, we find ourselves in 2008, and the world is melting down, and all of a sudden, we find on this cryptography site a white paper.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit further about your sort of initial experience in moving into the Bitcoin realm.
Yep.
And what that sort of looked like going forward.
Well, I can tell you that I didn't find it on a cryptography forum in 2008. That would be nice. I didn't.
Right.
So by the time I found it, felt really, really late. I think I probably heard about it maybe 2011. Mm-hmm. But in 2013 specifically, so there was a bunch of stuff going on from kind of 2005 and really after 2011, but it was, we'll call it 2003. It was the Iraq War and things like that. That kind of changed my mentality. Before then, absolutely zero interest or even acknowledgement of politics and the world and all that kind of stuff. I was computers, that kind of stuff. An entrepreneur selling stuff, things like that. Zero kind of acknowledgement of the kind of the wider political world. It wasn't until kind of the Iraq War and kind of recognizing that it was kind of a weird drumbeat that we were going into at that point. And so anyway, fast forward, that kind of switched my mindset. So now I'm paying more attention to the kind of the world at large, right? The larger world, and kind of what's going on and politics a little bit. And then 2008, we kind of had the financial crisis. Didn't impact me much, but it did impact the world. And so I was kind of aware of how this is kind of shifting things. But it wasn't until 2013 with the Cyprus bank crisis.
Yeah.
So that was the one where I saw Bitcoin. We'll call it the second time, but the first time that I paid any attention to it. Right.
Yeah.
The other one, I heard about mining, and I'd heard it. I had in my head what that was without looking at it at all in my head. I completely wrong interpretation of what I thought it was. Right. I thought I was sort of digging for something. It wasn't until 2013, the Cyprus thing, and they basically said, "Oh, the solution to this banking crisis is Bitcoin because you can't it's like they can't take it away from you and things like that." So that's when I delved in. Was kind of early 2013, and started learning about it, and then that was the rabbit hole. I mean, it was like, okay, between kind of what was happening in the world, between kind of MBA and kind of incentivization systems and things that we learned there, computer science and how it worked, and the software talking to each other, and being internet software. And I had written internet software tools kind of in that intervening time, right, from 95 to 2000. I had written software tools and sold a company, kind of related to that. But now I'm like, this is like grabs me in 2013, and and so I just went down this rabbit hole of just learning everything about it. And at the time, there's not that much stuff about it, right? There's right. The white paper, and there's some, lots of forums, or actually two main forums, the Reddit, our Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Talk were kind of the two main ones. And so I read kind of all of that stuff, but I'm kind of like, at the time, thirsty for more. Now, if you were doing that, you'd just be avalanche, because there's stuff.
Oh yeah.
So much stuff, right? You have to kind of filter it. But at the time, it was just sort of like, give me more, give me more, give me more. And so I just spent nights reading those things, those forums and those chats, and what it was about, and trying to learn more about it.
Yeah, definitely. I was in the business finance space, doing fundraising for both the debt and equity side of things, and around that time, and I was reading a bit, tiny bits about it around the 11 and 12 time frame, but it was just sort of like, oh, this is sort of like goofy internet, like video game kind of thing, and it'll just go away at some point. And then even in 13, it didn't click with me. 14, I met Will Bound, who was a mutual friend.
Yep.
And he used to come to my tea shop, and he'd talk about Bitcoin mining all the time. And of course, I was running my business, so it was sort of tough to try to spend a lot of time talking to him about it, and then running my biz. But in between that, I would be like, what the heck is he talking about mining? Like, he comes here to talk about mining to get tea. Like, is he mining here? Like, what does that look like? And then he was running the Bitcoin meetup at that point. And that's actually when I first met you. I don't know if you remember that, but it was, I think, in late 2016 or something around those lines. You were giving a talk about Ethereum and Dash. Ethereum was like $12 at the time. Bitcoin was like 800 and some change. I mean, it was just really still pretty early on. And it's funny because I think that no matter who we are, we're always going to think that we came in late, even though I don't think that late's going to exist possibly for another 10 or 20 years. Yeah. I mean, that's just my frame of thought. But so you got into it pretty heavily. Did it click right off the bat what Bitcoin actually meant? Because there's the understanding the technological side, but there's also understanding the economic side.
Yeah. For me, it did. But part of that was because of this economic crisis and Cyprus. I mean, they literally like shut the doors and, shut the bank doors, wouldn't let you withdraw. And then basically the politicians were arguing about how much they were going to take away before they opened the bank back up.
Yep.
And I mean, that was sort of, I don't know how many people were paying attention to it. I mean, it's Cyprus, it's somewhere else in the world or whatever. But if you think about, like, you kind of expect, or I kind of expect, that the money that is in the bank is mine, right? They're taking care of it. And when I was a kid, of course, the 70s. So, I mean, there was like interest rates potentially like, 8, 9, 10, 12, I mean, you were letting them use the money or whatever, and you got interest, right? You got a fair amount of interest. And then now it's like, pennies, but basically if you're giving them the money, they're giving you this tiny bit back, and they can just take it if they want to. That was pretty startling. And so, I mean, hasn't happened here, but it's probably closer to happening here than it has been in past years.
Yeah.
It's kind of in a weird space. But to have it actually happen, in a country that seems like they could print the money or, whatever. And yeah, it was surprising. I mean, ultimately it got resolved by everybody getting mad. And then they said, well, we'll take more from the people who have lots of money and less from the people who have less money. Right. And so they just kept moving that threshold up until there were fewer people rattling the gates. And then that was the number. And so it, the narrative was it hurt the Russian oligarchs and people that had stored their money in Cyprus more than it hurt the actual, people. But we have narratives like that today, right? Of that they're talking about. It's like, oh, we can't have very wealthy people, and what are we going to do? And we're going to tax their wealth, and not just their income. And so even today, they're kind of talking about these kind of like fundamental changes.
Yeah, there is. And, it's interesting. If I'm not mistaken, it was Henry Ford that once said, if Americans understood how the banking system worked, there'd be riots in the streets by morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I'm one of those, I think, sort of finance geeks that likes to sort of dive in and learn everything I can possibly learn about certain things. And I think it was in 2005, in summertime, I decided to spend the summer learning about international banking regulations. I don't know why. It's just one of those lunacy things, I guess. But that's when I really started diving further into the concept of fractional reserve banking and some of those types of concepts and what that actually means. And going back to your comment regarding Cyprus, I mean, banks don't hold all of the money.
Right.
In fact, they only have to have a certain percentage on their books, and then the rest is all lent out. So if there's a run on any bank, regardless of where you're at in the world, you're technically not going to get all of your money, depending on what that looks like. But sort of, the hashtag Bitcoin fixes this. So let's talk a little bit further about your experience in getting involved in the sort of technological side of Bitcoin and blockchain development and those types of things.
Okay. So, I mean, among the things that I was learning about Bitcoin was like, how does it work? Why does it work? And so, like the book Mastering Bitcoin kind of goes, by Andreas. I love his talks, love his book.
Phenomenal.
Both on the technical side, but also on the kind of visionary, what does this mean for the future, right? So Internet of Money series, right? Volume 1, Volume 2, those series are great for learning, what does it mean, right, for the future. And then the Mastering Bitcoin series is great from the technical side, like how does it work underneath. So I have got those books, read through those. So I kind of understood, pretty much how the technology works. And then, so that was mostly on the technical side. And then as part of, I was doing a project to do internet accounting, basically. It's really more of an itch that I had, right? Of like, I've got stuff kind of like spread out everywhere in different exchanges and wallets and everything. So I was trying to aggregate that. So I wrote a service to do that. But I also I was consulted for a company, ended up in the Netherlands for a talk with that Patrick Byrne was doing a keynote. And so he did his talk, and then he basically said, I'm going to do I want to do a parallel crypto equity, basically a tokenized stock, but for overstock. And overstock's already public, meaning they're already doing all the 10Qs counting, all the stuff. You have to do a lot of stuff as a public company. It's very expensive, but he was already doing that. So a parallel ticker, kind of stocks thing that would represent shares of overstock. I said, that's really cool idea. And and I didn't know for sure, but it was like, I think overstock is in Utah. And so I look it up. It's like, yeah, they're in Utah. And they're about 10 minutes from my house. So I said, I want to do that. And so then it took me a while. I mean, I called and he just barely set it up with, 2 lawyers and a developer or whatever. And then another friend of mine got hired on and they kind of built up a team. And then I think I was like number 5 or something to be added in there. So from there, we basically were researching the national market system and the stocks, and we did a bond offering via Counterparty, which is a layer 2 on top of Bitcoin that would allow you to create tokens. But we were also researching which one was best to use. So we looked at open assets and different technologies. So I was kind of aware of those and worked on projects kind of related to those and spinning up, open asset or Counterparty servers and stuff. And then I ended up leaving there and going to work for ANX International. And they wanted me to build an Explorer for open assets. There was an Explorer, but it wasn't open source. And so I basically worked on that. And that taught me a lot about how this second layer asset stuff was done, both on the how it works, but also the flaws that it had. When you're building stuff on top of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's completely oblivious to what you're kind of putting into the op return, which is almost like a comments area in Bitcoin with each transaction. Couple things you had to do. You had to every transaction for this asset, because you're using this comments thing to issue and to transfer other tokens that you've kind of created. That's how Counterparty works. But Bitcoin would ignore it unless you're also sending some Bitcoin with it, right? Not just the fees, but actually including Bitcoin, because otherwise it's like, why are you making a transaction just as a comment? It doesn't make any sense. So you had to include Bitcoin with it. So that was one of the clunky things. And then also when you're saying what your token represents, what the token means, the protocol for Counterparty was put in a shortened URL, like a bit.ly link kind of thing, to a web server that basically could explain via either JSON or something like that, explain what the token was. And, it was a way to basically make it so that you could include more information about the token, its name and, what it represents and a phone number to call, that kind of stuff. So it was like this JSON thing. And the problem was that a lot of these tokens were kind of like defunct and gone. And so you have a shortened URL that went nowhere, right? It's just like, page not found kind of thing. And so then you didn't even know what the token was about even back then. And this was only a couple of years into Counterparty, a year into Counterparty, and most of these links are gone. So with that information, that kind of helped inform the future creation of Ravencoin and how it works.
Okay, and that's now going on 5 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 years, 5 years. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So Ravencoin is a fork off of Bitcoin, off of BTC.
Yep.
And you're considered the sort of lead developer of Ravencoin. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Ravencoin is a really interesting platform because it's multifaceted. It's got a huge community already internationally. A lot of very smart people are working on Ravencoin.
Yep.
Let's maybe reverse back a tiny bit, because you and I, of course, especially you, understand this stuff thoroughly. Can you very simply, for the people who are watching this that are not very familiar with what we're talking about or about to maybe get into, if you can sort of narrow down in a few sentences, what is a blockchain?
Okay.
And then what is Ravencoin exactly?
Yep. So a blockchain is a description of the data structure, the data behind Bitcoin. And the reason it's called a blockchain is you take all the transactions that happen in a time period. On Bitcoin, that's 10 minutes. On Ravencoin, it's 1 minute. But all the transactions that happen during that 10 minutes. And you put them all together. and you create what's called a Merkle tree, which is basically hashes of all these transactions until you get like a what they call a Merkle root, which is a hash that kind of proves all the transactions. Meaning, if the Merkle root doesn't, if you hash all the stuff below it in these transactions, and you pair them all up like bowling pins, and you trickle them all up and hash, you get one hash that proves that no tampering was done with all the transactions that are included. And you can put that in the block header. And there's some other stuff that goes in a block header, including a nonce and a timestamp and things like that. So that block header, but more really important in that block header is the hash of the previous block header, right? So the header that came before. And a block is considered like this block header and all the transaction data, right? That's a block, right? So and it's chained together by, you have to create the block above it or before it first and have its hash, which is just it's kind of an algorithm where you crunch on it and it always comes out with the same data. You'll always get the same big number, right? It's a huge number, 0 to number of atoms in the universe, roughly size number. But you take that number and you stick it in the next block, and that way they're chained together. So they're kind of each block kind of points to the previous one. And that's a chain, right? So it's chained together, sort of in a, for computer science people, a reverse linked list, right? It's reversing. You can go from this block to the one above it, to the one above it, to the one above it. So it's a chain. So that's where blockchain comes from. But more importantly, the blockchain, if you basically go through all the transactions, you can create a ledger. And the ledger is basically how Bitcoin works. It's just a ledger. Yeah. It's the Bitcoin gets created each block. And then who owns that Bitcoin it's kind of like a big spreadsheet in the sky of like you can transfer it to the next person. So that's how Bitcoin works. And the person that can transfer it is the person that has a key, which is a big random number that allows you to transfer stuff on the ledger. There's a bunch of there's nothing encrypted or anything like that. It's all very public, very visible, but it does use some cryptography to do digital signatures to be able to prove that you owned it, right, and prove that you can transfer it to somebody else. So that's what a blockchain is. That's what Bitcoin is a ledger. Ravencoin extends Bitcoin and extends the ledger concept to tokens that you create that you own. Right? Instead of having to mine them into existence, you get to pay a little bit of Raven and then have all the tokens, which is great. Except it's like having like a big bag of poker chips, right? They're black poker chips, which in a casino are worth $100, but in this case they're not really worth $100 because they don't match the casino. They're not Bitcoin, right? They're your poker chips, but they represent whatever you want them to represent, and they're counterfeit proof, right? So you own them all, and really, if you say, well, I'm not going to do anything with them, then the value is 0. But if you say, hey, each one of these tokens represents an hour of my time, then they're worth something because the value of the hour of your time, which could change over time, right? As you get smarter, do more contracting, get more information or whatever, and are more useful, the value of your time could go up, right? But this token, could represent an hour of your time. Could also represent a share of your company. It can represent wine that's not ready to drink that can be redeemed for bottles later when they're ready to drink. It can be shares of gold in the ground or gold that's in the safe. It can represent anything. Mm-hmm. So the important part is that you get a unique name, right? So that your token is guaranteed to be like that name on the Ravencoin network. That's your name, right? And so that's kind of its anchor piece. And then you can create however many you want, from 1 to 21 billion. You get to choose anywhere in there. It doesn't cost you any more to create 21 billion than it does to create one. They're yours. You can make them non-divisible if they represent an hour of your time and you only want to work in hour blocks, for example. You could make them non-divisible, right? You redeem one, and even if the job took 45 minutes, you redeem a whole one, kind of thing. Or you could make them divisible to 8 decimal places, like Bitcoin. So, like 0.0000001, 8 decimal places. And that may be useful for something that you want to be very, very divisible. You can also make it 2 decimal places if you want it to work more like dollars with pennies, right? So, fits in an accounting system or something like that. Anyway, you create the tokens, and then Ravencoin basically extends Bitcoin to do the ledger function, the same ledger function that's doing for Bitcoin, but for tokens that you own and control, or that you created, that you issued. And again, what those tokens represent, there's a whole universe of things you can do with that, different use cases, and people are doing different things with them. But Ravencoin lets you use that ledger. And so these are counterfeit-proof tokens. If you leave your token reissuable, you can create more. If you mark it as non-reissuable, you can't, right? So it's locked, right? So you create 1 million, say non-reissuable. There will only ever be 1 million of those, and they could represent a share of $1 million art piece, right? Where they're sold for each $1, and then you own however many shares of artwork. It can be. There's lots of different things, right? There's lots of use cases. You can go to Raven Wiki and you can see some of the ones that are already in use and that are being done. But that's what Ravencoin is. It's extending Bitcoin to and Raven RVN is like Bitcoin in the sense that it has a market, it has a value, it has that kind of stuff. It's on Binance and Binance US and things like that. But the tokens that you create, they're not on a market, but there are marketplaces now for those tokens that you can put it on the marketplaces. There's, I think, 6 or 7 different marketplaces, some of them for NFTs, and we can talk about those later if you want. But that's what Ravencoin is. It's extending Bitcoin, but for tokens that you make.
Okay, that's definitely a phenomenal explanation. And like you said, it's definitely a multifaceted platform. So not only can you send Raven in and of itself as sort of like you do Bitcoin for value, sort of a value for value proposition. Yep. So like, let's say the kid down the street wants to mow my lawn, and he says, I take Ravencoin. I can pay him in Ravencoin.
Yep.
I could also potentially, if I created my own coin, let's say Jason Woodland's lawn coin, I could technically pay him in Jason Woodland's lawn coin if I created that on the Ravencoin platform as well. Of course, nobody would ever want to take that, but
yeah, more importantly, let's reverse that, right? And so you could buy with Raven tokens that he created, that he's giving the value of, like, this token is good for 1 lawn mowing, right? And you could buy them in advance, right, for your neighbors, for whatever, and then those tokens, he would be responsible for redeeming them for mowing lawns. And so that way he's the one giving the value, right? And then you're giving him Raven, which he can sell immediately and turn it into Bitcoin or dollars or whatever he wants. But then they're acting sort of like a prepaid gift card for lawn mowing. And
perfect.
And because he can also, when he creates them, and we didn't talk about this before, but you can basically say what the token represents. And instead of putting in that bit.ly link, like we talked before, which may not point to anything, you can put that data in IPFS, which is Interplanetary File System, which gives you back a hash, and that becomes the name of the file and also a reference point into the file. And that way he can kind of permanently, immutably say, this is what my lawn mowing token represents. It's like a lawn up to this size, blah, 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 done between, Monday through Friday or whatever he wants to do, the specification for redeeming this token. And then same thing for any token that someone creates, it's what it represents, right? It could be share of art or upline or whatever.
Wow. Perfect. Yeah, very, very good explanation there. Let's now touch on the concept of NFT. Non-fungible token.
Yep.
Of course, it's the buzzword of buzzwords right now.
It is.
As we talked on the phone the other day, we're probably sitting in some kind of a bubble territory bubble. Of course, bubbles doesn't mean that something goes away after it softens. But I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding exactly of what an NFT is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more importantly, what the NFT will become in time.
Yep.
Can we have a conversation about that?
Sure. Right. So let's start with what NFT stands for. So non-fungible token. Fungible means you can swap one for another. So a US quarter, for example, is fungible. Like if I could trade you one quarter for another quarter, they're kind of all the same. I mean, they have a different date, but they're pretty much swappable for one another. They're fungible, tradable. They're almost the same thing. You don't care if you get one quarter or a different quarter. Non-fungible means they're unique. unique would be like a, specific, artwork from Picasso, like an original. That's unique, right? It's non-fungible. There isn't another one like it. You can't trade it for one just like it because there isn't another one just like it, right? So non-fungible. The token part is these tokens or assets that you create on platforms. Ravencoin's not the only asset platform. It's the best one, but it's not the only one. And there's reasons for that, right? You get your own unique name. It ties links to the data and things like that. Some of these other platforms don't do. So there are reasons I'd say it's the best, and not just like self-aggrandizing. But we can go through there, or there's other videos that I go through, why it's the best. But so you can create these tokens. So there have been cases where someone says, "Oh, I've created like 50 identical NFTs." Well, that's not really an NFT. I mean, if they break down the word, they're kind of misusing the word NFT. So with an NFT, there'll be one of them, right? One. It's like a one of one, right? Or you could have like, if you created 100 of them, they'd have to be serialized in some way, like one of 100, one of 100, or one of one, one of two, one of three, one of, that, or rather 2 of 100, 3 of 100, 4 of 100, right? You create 100 of them, but each one is individually serialized and unique. Ravencoin's particularly good at this. We called them kind of before NFT became a popular word, we called them unique assets, right? So there's only one. On Ravencoin, they have a unique, guaranteed unique name. It'll have a hashtag in the middle of the name, and there's a reason for that. So you create a root asset, which is like your, we'll call it the anchor, right? So you create an asset, right? Might be your name, Jason Woodland, so you create that. And then under that, you do hashtag and then, the name of your artwork, your original artwork or something like that, right? And so that whole thing collectively, Jason Woodland hashtag, my original artwork, that's the NFT, right? So there's only one of those. And you can attach data to that. You can attach the actual artwork or a thumbnail of the actual artwork. If it's representative of like physical art, then the token kind of becomes, we'll call it a certificate of authenticity, meaning you created it, only you owned Jason Woodland, right? And so only you could create Jason Woodland hashtag something else. So you could do different artwork, but everyone would be Jason Woodland hashtag and a different artwork name. And those are certificates of authenticity that no one else could create because they can't create anything Jason Woodland hashtag blah because you own Jason Woodland, right? Yeah. So it gives it a provenance and an anchor that says no one else can create these. You don't really have that in the digital world until blockchains. You don't really have that in the digital world because you create something digital. If you put it on a computer, you can take a computer hard drive out, put it in a copy machine, basically copy it in, copy the entire hard drive, put it in a different computer, and that computer has all the digital stuff is identical. The only reason this works on a blockchain is the blockchain is a ledger that's the same everywhere. And so basically these unique things are on the ledger and not necessarily on the computer, right? So only the private keys that let you move it are on the computer. So you have to protect those. Okay, so back to NFTs. So right now what you'll see typically is digital artwork, digital 3D models, things like that, tied to a token. The token is counterfeit proof. Now, in general, and this is just my kind of belief, the digital artwork can be copied the same way any digital artwork can be copied. You can if you see it online, you can right click, save as, and you made a copy. If you download something on a web browser, it's already made a copy in the cache, right? So digital stuff can be copied. But the token itself, the ownership of that token, the management ownership, and holding that token is on the ledger. And so right now, in my view, there's a little bit of a gap between like, okay, I own this NFT. You certainly own the token because you have the private keys that can control that token. The artwork that's attached to it, the artist can give you the rights to that, right? They can say, you're the only one that can copy it. You're the only one that can, transfer it.
Commerce or
use it. So you could even potentially sell that digital item into, and let somebody else use it on their website, things like that. That's not really happening today. Meaning the meta information about the token doesn't usually have a contract in there that basically says, I'm transferring the copyright of this to you, kind of thing. It's sort of this somewhat half implied, never been tested in court kind of agreement that, so that's kind of where we are today. There are people that are buying some of these things for millions of dollars, and then they own the token for sure, right? They can provably show that they own the token. The artwork, someone can right click and say, save as. So it's kind of this gray area. I do think in the future, and I think we talked about this a little bit, is as we move into like the metaverse and things like that, in the real world, we do have Patek Philippe watches, Breitling watches. We have, really fancy shoes, gold chains that were created by somebody who, or
famous designer or something.
Famous designers, famous bags that look like the same one from China, but really aren't because they have the tag and whatever, but they look like it. And that's a good example, I think, of what's happening. That, the fake bag from China that looks like the real one, right? May even have the tag with the actual name, illegally, but may have it. It's sort of a right-click save as, right? I'm looking like I'm sort of an imposter. I bought this bag for $50, but I'm trying to imply it's $2,500, that kind of thing. That's kind of where we are in this digital world. Now, in the metaverse and things like that, there is the ability to have the computers prove ownership, right? So the which would be the equivalent of like grabbing someone's bag and looking at it and inspecting it and seeing if it's a really, a real bag, or if it's a Chinese made one, by just inspecting all the, seams and whatever. But you can have computers do that kind of stuff and prove ownership. And so you do potentially have this possibility of having 3D models that are actually the real ones from the artist, that the software itself may only accept the original, right? That has the actual, a token associated with it that can bring it into this metaverse. And then, and then it can be display your, it's not my thing, because I'm not a type of person that, buys handbags and things like that. But for people who are like, want to show that they paid this, or they have the wealth, or they have the, the style and whatever, the computers can basically prove that information. So that type of thing may end up being something that comes out of this NFT thing. I did see one that was, it wasn't actually put into a 3D model, but it was a 3D model, really cool, really well-designed art, like mask kind of thing. It was really elaborate, really, really fancy. And I thought, yeah, if you had like custom artists that created a mask, your identity, right, of this very elaborate mask kind of thing, and you were the only one that has it, it would be like and the software, the metaverse software, whoever's making it or whatever, the VR people, or if they're only allowing the real one in, right? So there's only one of those that's created by the actual artist, and you're the only one that has it. It's a little bit like on Twitter, you have your profile pic or whatever, but someone can right click that profile pic and save it. Well, imagine if you couldn't, right? So if you saw that mask with this elaborate kind of thing, and the software is preventing anyone else from doing that, you potentially have like, oh, that's the real guy, right? That's his avatar. That's his, that's his persona. And he's the only one that has it, because you can kind of prove it using the, this NFT idea. I could see that being a real thing.
Wow. Okay. So, and to connect back again to that conversation we had the other day on the phone, the concept of provenance is that so that's in essence of a chain of custody of a painting, and of course what we see today is more of an analog provenance, where it's like sort of showing who was the previous owner, and then it was maybe sold on the Sotheby's auction, and then someone in Russia owned it for 12 years, and then it was on and on and on.
Yep.
Well, almost we could look at maybe what the future of an NFT could look like you were saying the other day, is that chain of that provenance, that chain of custody, could almost connect to anything.
Yep.
So now if you're saying, well, I want to buy this pair of used Versace sunglasses, first of all, are they real? Are they authentic?
Yep.
Because some of the lenses will have like a what is it? As like a security number, some kind of a serial number. That's what I'm looking for. But even that can technically be changed. So maybe there's something that connects to an NFT, but then you could also see, first of all, are they legit?
Yep.
And then second of all, almost the chain of custody for that pair of sunglasses.
Yep.
So you could say, okay, they were bought in a Versace showroom in New York City, Manhattan.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, like 2 owners, right?
Yep. And the original owner got the certificate of authenticity, the digital certificate of authenticity, right? And the subsequent owners would be like, oh, these are marked with the, like the little digital mark. So, there should have been a certificate of authenticity that comes with this. And it's like, oh, yeah, hang on, I do have that. I'll transfer it to you with the sunglasses. And the value of the sunglasses would maintain a much higher value as it transfers with this certificate of authenticity, because it's provably from the original manufacturer. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So technically, I think that we're just barely scratching the tip of the really the tip of the iceberg on all of these things in the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency and the NFT world in general. And of course, we could just talk for days because I think we've got so much passion behind all this stuff.
So real quick, Rick Demont Art is already doing this, right? On Ravencoin, there's a certificate of authenticity that has Rick Demont and the hashtag, and then the one that goes with each art piece, right? So this counterfeit proof NFT or certificate of authenticity comes with every painting, and so you can kind of prove its provenance. So it's being done already.
Nice. Yeah. Well, and I think that once people from the physical art world to the digital art world, once they sort of come together, and that's not going to be for a long time, I don't think, because
that's what this NFT thing is doing, though, in spades. It has, at a minimum, brought in the most creative people I've ever seen. Right? I mean, they're just. It's merging this very hard, like digital Bitcoin, hardened kind of, hardcore money value kind of thing with this art community to create these NFTs. And this blending has created just a magical, collection of projects and people. So it's very impressive.
Nice. So maybe let me retract what I said. Maybe not necessarily the melding of the digital and the physical world in terms of art, but maybe the general population that usually has a slower adoption on the adoption curve of understanding, wait a minute, this actually does have value, even though I don't have it hanging on my wall. Sort of like the same concept of, well, what is Bitcoin? I can't touch and feel Bitcoin, so it must be fraudulent or non-existent.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Well, gosh, we've covered some amazing ground here, and it's been just so much fun. And I know we could probably talk for another 2 hours pretty easily. But just for the sake of time, is there anything that I may have missed, or something that we need to either know about you as a person, or that we need to know further about what Ravencoin is and what the future of this looks like before we start to move to a wrap up?
I'll just throw this out there, just for people, rather than giving them information, I'll tell them where they can find it. Right. So if you want to find more information on Ravencoin, go to ravencoin.org or ravencoin.foundation. So Ravencoin Foundation is basically there to just support the whole Ravencoin ecosystem. If you go to the website, it's not pretty, but it has a monster footer at the bottom where you can branch out to education information, social media sites, other people that are doing things on Ravencoin, NFT sites, places where you can buy Ravencoin, sell Ravencoin, trade it for other coin. I mean, there's a ton of links, right? So you can just branch out from there. They're categorized. So that's probably the kind of the best thing. If you want to join the community, there's a really, really big Ravencoin community on Twitter. You can follow me at Tron Black. You can follow some of the people I follow, like Leon_Texas or Aaron Day Atlas or some of those. And then you can branch out from there and follow some of the other people that you like in that space. And there's lots of stuff going on all the time. Yep.
Absolutely. I appreciate you throwing out those links. Mango Farm is also a good follow as well on Twitter.
Yep. And Mango Farm Assets is a wallet where you can, it's a web-based wallet where all the signing, digital signing, if you're familiar with Bitcoin, how it works, digital signing is all done on your side, meaning on your browser does it, so the keys never leave. So it's not holding your assets or your private keys. You are. So you got to make sure you write down the 12 words to back it up. But yeah, mangofarmassets.com is a good place to start too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If it's possible to do in one sentence, where do you think the future of Bitcoin and just this entire sort of crypto space is moving? Do you feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg like I do? What are your initial thoughts?
Yep, tip of the iceberg. So think like Blockbuster Video versus Netflix, right? So moving value is just going to shift to digital. Now, some of it's going to be done by governments, and some of it's going to be done, in this peer-to-peer networks and whatever. But that kind of transition has started, right? So newspapers to websites, right? Magazines to websites, right? There will still be some remnants of the old world, but this digital transition has been started and will continue. And it started on January 3rd, 2009, right, with the ability to move value electronically, right, which you couldn't really do before because, you'd copy a computer and that's counterfeiting if you copied it, right? But it started that day, and it's just continuing, and it's growing really, really, really fast. So I think that's where we're headed. Just compare it to some of the other digital transitions that we've seen. There's been lots of them, lots of digital transitions. Compare it to just different ones and collections of that, and I think we'll just see that going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So my final question for you, Tron, is what is one of your favorite songs or favorite quotes, or you can do both?
Okay. I don't have a quote off the top of my head. I just read The Fourth Turning. It was a really good one in there, but I don't remember what it was. I'll probably lose a lot of followers by talking about my favorite song. It's not. We'll call it like former favorite song. It was from my childhood, right? So I go up to there was a jukebox up at Snowbird, and it was "Tide Is High" by Blondie.
Oh, that's awesome! I love Blondie.
Yeah, so I like that song. It's kind of a
how could you possibly lose followers because of Blondie? Blondie's amazing.
We'll see. I'm sure that number's going down now, but I'll let y'all know how many I lose.
That's awesome. Well, Tron, this has been a sincere pleasure. I really appreciate your time coming onto the show today. We've been able to learn a ton. Any final thoughts from you?
Well, I want to say thank you for having me on. Ravencoin doesn't have a marketing department and didn't take any money from anybody, right? It was funded by a division of Overstock, and therefore we don't have like marketing advertising. So anytime I can talk about Ravencoin to new people and that it's sort of a grassroots kind of thing, which is different than some of the other projects. So I really appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, I'll move to a wrap up. If you don't mind, I'll have you hang out in the green room, so to speak.
Okay. Yep.
And I'll go ahead and wrap up the show, and then we'll just talk for a couple moments thereafter.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Thanks, Tron. So there you have it, Tron Black, ultra well-versed individual. Check out all of those links that he talked to you a little bit about, and I will also have them posted on YouTube as well, so you can click into that. If you're on Twitter, follow Tron Black on Twitter, so of course at Tron Black. And again, thank you so much for joining us on Always the Journey TV, episode number 57 now in the books. Please throw us a thumbs up on the video on YouTube, throw us a comment if you have any questions. Tron, I'm sure we'll have the answer. And thank you for joining us. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and we'll throw up some outro music. Much love, and have a wonderful holiday season.